Hey everyone, I'm Angela Lynn.
And I'm Jesse Lynn, and welcome back to another episode of But Where Are You Really From? This week's topic is a little bit amusing, as you can see by my outfit, about life and living life on the edge. And this was born from like a random musing that I had, not a dance floor going out musing, which I often have, but just kind of like I was floating around my life, doing my own business. And I was just like, wow, my life is really not what the average person's life is. And I think that thinking has been exacerbated by how much we see a difference between the communities that exist in the US and like what people want and what people need and what their like perspectives and views are. And so thinking about my life, I was like, I don't think anything in my life has been really average, even from when I was really little, like growing up in Irvine, California. And so there was this idea that formed in my head that like, wow, I've like constantly been living my life on like the very edge because we're not average and we're always trying to push the boundary of what success looks like, whether that's like academic success or career success or personal success or what have you. So that's the topic. And maybe my first question to you is, do you wonder or do you feel like you're the average person?
No, but as you were talking, I was also kind of like, who is the average person? Like, who do we even think an average person is? Are we just talking about like a middle class white person? Like, I don't know what the average person really means because I think in part of what you were saying was like, like academic, right? Or like having high academic pressures or like goals for ourselves or families having those goals for ourselves and that pushing us into being not quote unquote average. I think in that respect, it is like true. I wouldn't count that as average because if you're gonna say average, I'm thinking some like middle class, truly middle class, because I also think people don't really know what middle class means because that salary is much lower than you think it is. I don't even know what it is. It's like 50K or something. It's like low. It's not like, because if you live in coastal areas, which I think constantly, especially if you live in California or New York, you need to have a reality check that you are absolutely not the average person unless you're living in like the central part of California, for example, because San Francisco, Los Angeles, you are not the average person. New York, you are definitely not the average human. So that thinking of like I'm truly middle class, probably like both parents have to work, maybe they have multiple jobs. And then you as like a student, maybe you just like you're just going to school, but like you don't have like high ambitions per se. You're just like kind of like trying to get through life. You're trying to like take it for what it is, and that's kind of it. Because even when I think about like we grew up in a upper middle class city, suburb, and when I think about even just my like non-Asian friends or like non-ethnic, let's call it that, non-ethnic friends, non-immigrant family friends, from an academic standpoint, it was definitely like much lower pressure. It was more just like you're supposed to go to school, but like do your best and like whatever it is what it is. Like they didn't really, those parents didn't like care that much about whether or not they excelled. Versus like if you're from an immigrant family, I think it is very different because regardless, I think of your social, like socioeconomic background as an immigrant family, like every immigrant family moves to a different country to try to do better. I don't think most immigrants are moving to a place where they think they have worse. Yeah, so like there's already a built-in thing where like your family is kind of pressuring you to be better than they were or they had in their circumstances. So already that's like not quote unquote average because there are built-in expectations and pressures. But it's a pretty like, I think it's subjective because who is even deciding what average really means?
If you think about like 50% of the people in the US don't have passport, which means they've never traveled internationally. Really different from Taiwan, where like almost 100% of the people have a 4-year university degree. I don't think we have a very high percentage of university degree coverage as an overall percentage of the population. So I just think about those things and it's like, it's actually not even that common for the quote unquote average person to have ever traveled anywhere internationally expansive or gone to like a 4-year academic institution. And that is like such a different experience altogether that I'm like, if that is the average and that's where I kind of place like that, my thinking about it, where we sit is like so far away from that. And even from an income perspective, I think like where we sit is like at least top 10%, right? So it's like really far away from what this idea of an average person's life is in terms of like income, their ability to go places, their education level. Like it's a very different experience.
I think a lot of times once you've reached a certain salary threshold, honestly, like everything just is in terms of like how inconvenient it becomes to you, but not like does not change your day-to-day life actually. And so I think we often, I don't even like to use the word average because I just think the really subjective part is what we consider normal. And we have so many parts of our lives and our upbringings and our current social stratospheres that make us think what we do is normal because you're comparing yourself to like the people around you. And in that sense, you're like, oh, I'm normal. Everyone's like this. And then you like step outside your little bubble once and you're like, wait, this is totally what? Who am I? What is this?
I think about that because I feel like I've been put on this track where I constantly have to ask myself that, right? It's like the academic track, then the career track, and those things like constantly reinforce your need to ask like, what's coming next? Where's the next improvement? Where's the next development? And that like pushes and forces you to stay out on the edge. And I wonder if that cascades into like other parts of my life, right? Like I've talked pretty openly about like the pursuit of partying and like all these things that I think are not average, not something experienced by the median person, and not a lifestyle, I guess if you want to call it that, that is generally attainable. And so it's like I think about that and I don't know what to do with it because I'm like, there's a cap to it at some point, right? You have to say like, I'm out of this rat race. But that's kind of how I was like feeling about this particular topic.
You've heard me complain about how weird it is to be an American-born Mandarin speaker because I grew up speaking Mandarin at home and have a passing native accent, but simultaneously sound like a child when trying to talk about real things. Since I realized no one out there was catering to people like us and decided, I'm just going to do it myself. I teamed up with my native Taiwanese Mandarin language teacher to create Real You Mandarin, a self-paced online Mandarin course built specifically for ABCs and ABTs. All of our content is video-based, realistic dialogues centered on topics you'd actually want to talk about, from dating and pop culture to media representation and growing up as a minority in a majority society. You'll learn the relevant vocabulary in the context you actually use them and be able to practice them daily with pre-built digital flashcards. You'll also be able to practice speaking by shadowing, repeating back, or following along with all of these dialogues to practice speaking at natural speed with the right pronunciations. Check out the course at realumandarin.com and get 10% off using promo code WhereAreYouFrom10. Let us help you express the real you when you speak Mandarin. Hey listeners, wondering how you can support us? The biggest way is by increasing our visibility by following us on Instagram at WhereAreYouFromPod, on TikTok at But Where Are You Really From, subscribing to our YouTube channel under But Where Are You Really From Podcast, rating and reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, and telling your friends. The more people we can get to listen to the show, the more we can continue spotlighting different perspectives and stories. And if you feel so inclined, we're also accepting donations at buymeacoffee.com/whereareyoufrom. Thanks y'all. I think what you're trying to express, or at least the way I'm interpreting it, is like, honestly, it sounds like you're just trying to pursue happiness and fulfillment. And the more that you chase things that you thought you were supposed to chase, the more you're realizing you're not being satisfied by achieving those things. So then you're like, so what's the next thing that I'm supposed to chase that's supposed to give me the satisfaction? Because I think you and I have talked about it though before. Like when I think about my parents and me and a lot of our clashes growing up, a lot of it, and even now, because I'm just doing things they still don't like, but a lot of it comes down to like, as long as you make money, as long as you have like a surplus of money, you're like safe. And so they don't need to feel this like quote unquote fulfillment necessarily, like versus I think for me and for a lot of us, when again, it's like it is a privilege once you've reached a certain salary level that you no longer are worried about paying rent or feeding yourself, those bare minimum things to live well as a human, you then start wondering like, so what else is there? So you're always striving for more. There's like no place. I think you have to be just like mega, mega unreasonably wealthy to ever get to a point where you're not like adjusting up anymore in that sense. But I do think happiness and meaning and like all those like kind of intangible things, like why am I here? And like, do I have that spark in my daily life? Those are things that like money can't buy. And so that's what, for me, when I hear you talk about all this, what I'm gravitating towards is like, I think you're just realizing that like material things and these like material markers of success and things that we were pushed to care about when we were growing up, like don't actually equate anything from that like intangible sense. And maybe that's why your marker keeps getting pushed past, is because you keep hitting these things and it's not bringing you the fulfillment or satisfaction that you thought you would get.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I want to do is also like just expose a little bit this fact that maybe like our listeners are already aware of it, but even the idea of like what success is for us is very far beyond like what average success is for everybody else. And so I love being there, right? Like there's nothing more amazing than riding the edge of something, right? Like nothing more amazing than getting a promotion. Like not like more amazing, but there's like a rush that comes with achieving these like targets in your life. But they're also at the same time, like I've come to realize more and more that it's like this almost like a chasing high behavior where it's like so far beyond like what is normal, where it really starts to skew like your perspective, as you said, the like scope creep on your life starts to just like really skew beyond. And I particularly noticed that when I started taking more time to do the pottery stuff, where I'm just like relaxed and I'm not really focused on anything. And it just made me realize how like bumpy a lot of these things, like the ripples that the things cause in my life, because they are really great ups in life, but then they ripple through the rest of my life where it just like causes a lot of chaos in how I feel.
I do think a lot of it has to do with our own like individual senses of self and like value and social, value, social status, all those things. Because even when you said the thing about like when you slow down with the pottery and you realize how like crazy it is that you care about all this stuff and that you're chasing all this stuff, right? Like I think when you think about like the quote unquote average person who like doesn't strive for all this stuff, it's just, I think most quote unquote average people who are not like our salary level and like thinking about all these like promotional things, like I think they prioritize different things. Like they also prioritize a lot of times just like having an enjoyable life with their families, having a hobby, like maybe it's pottery, maybe it's fishing, maybe it's camping, whatever it is, right? But like having time to do that on the weekends, like spending time with their friends, whatever, right? And like that's fulfilling in and of itself, and they don't need all these other things to like be chasing because they don't derive pleasure necessarily from that. And if you even think about it, well, like why do we even derive pleasure from that? It's like because we've created these like invisible unnecessary goals for ourselves, and like a lot of it is to like push yourself up in this like social ladder that we've fabricated matters, versus like a lot of people don't care about that stuff because they're just like, I mean, I'm having fun, like life is good and like I don't care about that stuff, and does it really matter in the end? Because I also think about this stuff when you talked about like we're not normal, right? Like I mean, we're moving to Japan end of this year, very not normal for like a average American. But even when we just spend time with like quote unquote normal Japanese people, like local Japanese people, when we're talking, I think we all often realize how unnormal we are when we talk to them. Like, yeah, just the amount of times we've traveled, like even how much we've traveled within Japan. A lot of people are like, you've traveled more than Japanese people, like to different Japanese cities. The idea of like being nomadic or like working for yourself or working even just remote is very like foreign to most people. Like a lot of this stuff is like, we're like, oh, this sounds kind of unnormal. And like some little things like, we took Japanese class for like 4 days a week or whatever, for a couple months. And we took a lot of taxis because we were like running late, and like they were so cheap compared to even just like Uber in the US, right? It would be like $7 for the taxi from our house to the school. And so we did a lot. And I think we mentioned it once. And the teacher was like, what are you, like, super rich or something? And we're like, oh shit, we should stop talking about this. Like, it made us realize how, like, weird we sounded. So yeah, I think there's a lot of little things like that where you realize, like, you're really not normal. Like, what?
Yeah, and I think it's like, I think you mentioned it when we talked about it before, but it's kind of like we're almost paying money to try to get back to this like more simplistic state of being, which is just dropping a lot of the things that are extraneous to our lives that don't really add joy. And I think it's a reminder of, like, I think the balance that you have to strike between like riding these parts of your life that can be like so euphoric and wonderful, but also like reconciling that, or recognizing that that's not an average experience that you will always have.
And rethinking of your priorities potentially in life, of why this stuff matters to you, if it should matter to you. What about you listeners? What do you think? What do you think about your life? Are you average? Are you on the extremes? What stuff do you care about that you don't think actually most people care about? Let us know in the comments of wherever you're listening to or watching this.
And as always, come back next week for a fresh new episode. And until then,
再见,
bitches.